Doesn't it make you feel like trying to save the sunlight? Surely you feel the way we do. We're not gonna last forever with blue skies and sunny weather. The problem is up to me and you.
Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, live on Power Talk 1210 KEVT, Sahuarita, Tucson. Jackson Craft along the way, engineering. It's great to have you part of the program today. My show revolves around the 4 L's. Leadership, love, life, and lineage, in the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. The sustainability of art is constant movement between modes and scales, lyrics, melodies, symmetry, odd meters, and a fundamental belief in the huminality of music. My guest today has been performing in big brass bands the last 6 decades. He's been creating trends and staying on the productive side of the hill, even as the fallibility and shortcomings of man are self-evident. He was co-founder of the A&M record label and was instrumental in fashioning music that appealed to a society that was going through a cultural revolution. Their ears were open to many different styles of music, including West Coast jazzers like Pete Jolly, Chet Baker, Leroy Vinnegar, and Shelly Manne. He developed good working relationships with Quincy Jones, who was working on You Got It Bad Girl, as the girl from Impanima had come and gone, and a new, slicker form of blues and jazz known as funk came into the American Lexicon. My guest plays a varied mix of Western swing, Afro-Cuban mariachi, and country pop. Before labels, he was a musician who straddled all genres, evident from his collaboration with South African freedom fighter Hugh Masekela. Since 1974, he has been collaborating with his wife Lanny Hall, forming a duo playing concert halls, hockey rinks, film and television shows, and in their own living room, swinging their way through the day or into Tucson on the 26th of August for a gig at the Fox Theater. Herb Alpert, welcome.
Quite an introduction.
How are you, brother?
I'm pretty good. I'm very good, as a matter of fact. It's a beautiful day here at the moment. It's one of those heat waves wafting through Malibu at the moment.
Oh, yeah, like a suffocating Tucson heat wave. It's about 110 here already.
oh, it's cool here. It's only 82.
Yeah, no, well, it's an honor to talk to you, man. You know, Herb, I just wanted to start up by asking you, you've been collaborating with your wife for quite a few years, and I wanted you to talk about some intangible qualities of longevity in the music business in 2015, not 1974, but what are the things that it takes in order to work together in what has become a small business and not an industry?
Oh, well, I don't know if I know the total answer to that, but passion plays a major part in it. I mean, if you're not passionate about what you're doing as a musician, as an artist, I mean, you might as well forget it, because while you're sleeping, a lot of people that are passionate are practicing.
Right.
So, we have this great relationship. I met Lonnie in 1966 when I auditioned with my partner Jerry Moss. We auditioned Sergio Mendes in Brazil 66. Fell in love with the music and fell in love with her voice, and, one thing led to another.
And you guys are coming here on the 26th together, and you still, do you still practice? Like, do you play together in your living room?
I play. I have a studio at the beach here, and I'm playing at the moment.
That's beautiful.
I practice every day.
I love.
Not because I have to. I just love it. Man, I've been doing it since I was 8. I was fortunate to have a music appreciation class in my grammar school, and there was a table filled with instruments, and I picked up a trumpet, tried to make a sound out of it, but I couldn't. It was, I thought you just blow hot air into the mouthpiece, but
right.
Finally when I got that sound, man, this instrument was talking for me, because I was super quiet as a kid. And when I was making noise through the horn, it was speaking for me. So it was great. So I'm really excited about trying to make sure that we can return the arts programs into public schools and private schools.
How do you account for the fact that well, you just said something there. How do you want to go about doing that, and why did they get taken out in the first place?
Oh, I don't think our politicians understand the value of the arts. I think one of the first things that they carve out when they're looking for a little bit of money is the art program. So I don't get it, because I honestly feel that musicians are healers, and it was proven that if music is played before somebody has surgery and then after surgery, that the pain is much less, and it's a win-win.
Can you talk about the first time that you either took part in or witnessed music as a healing art?
Well, it heals me. All I can tell you is, the thing that I love about music and being a musician and being an artist, because I've been painting and sculpting for, over 45 years as well. When you're doing it, you're in the exact moment of your life. So when I'm practicing, I'm there. I'm just doing it. When I'm painting, I'm there, and same for sculpting. But, when we're playing concerts, it's such a beautiful feeling to get the response of the crowd, which is, that's exciting as well. But to be able just to be in that exact moment of when things are happening, because it's not that easy. We all know that. We sometimes live in the past and sometimes live in the future, and to get right into that moment is very seductive.
Right, and that's very well put. But can you talk about a transcendent moment? I think part of the issue is that whether it's politicians or just the general zeitgeist is that it's music is just art, and there is no quantitative way to measure that. Therefore, it's not really a profession. And that's not the way it was when you were discovering, Brazil 66 and all these intoxicating bands. You had regular cats who would come out and pay to hear all this cross-fertilized music. And, it actually allow people to make a living doing that. And so I'm wondering about the idea of saying, well, a musician is not really a profession, and I want you to juxtapose that to the fact that when you and Jerry formed A&M, it was not that way. You could play the music you wanted to play, and people would come and pay to listen to it.
Well, I think they will still do that to some degree. It just has changed dramatically. I mean, when I started fooling with recordings, man, I had a wire recorder. I had a Webcore wire recorder, and then I had a tape machine, an Ampex, and then I was lucky enough to have two tape machines. When I heard Les Paul and Mary Ford, they had a record in 1958 or so, How High the Moon, and Les was stacking his guitars. I tried that on the trumpet, and all of a sudden I got onto this sound that was really the genesis of the Tijuana Brass sound. But before that, the pivotal moment, if that's what you were asking, was when I realized, I have a classical background. I studied classical music for maybe 12 years, and then all of a sudden, I heard Louis Armstrong and Miles and Clifford Brown and Chet Baker and those guys, and I wanted to do some of that. I wanted to close my eyes and just play whatever came out, because when you're playing classical music, man, you're interpreting the music through the composer. Mm-hmm. And not only the notes, but he has the, above the notes, he has, how he wants it played, loud, soft, all the nuances. So you don't really have a chance to be creative. You have to be creative through the eyes of the composer. So when I started playing jazz or wanting to play jazz, I started copying my favorite musicians. I could play a little bit like Louis. I could play a little bit like, all the guys that I liked, only to realize that who wants to hear that, man? They've already done it.
Right.
So that was my aha moment. I realized that I had to come up with my own voice, my own style, my own way of doing it, if I was ever going to succeed in that business. And of course, when I met the great Sam Cooke, I learned a lot of lessons from him, although he didn't know he was giving me lessons. But I was just watching how he approached everything. He was, he was a great artist. The guy was a genius, and he came out of the gospel field, and everything he sang was, meaningful.
I know. I want you're waxing poetic. We're talking to Herb Alpert right now, just on fire already. Can you talk about Chet Baker, Clifford Brown, the idea of closing your eyes and not being beholden to the composer, but creating your own thing, taking chances, and how that is reflective of, I don't know, it's funny. I was driving home with my wife and kids last night, and my wife was talking to me about one of our friends' daughters is going to England to play in the marching band, to perform. But is it a reflection of our society now being a little bit more, much more cautious, much more rigid, and not taking chances, being more beholden to the composer as opposed to letting loose, like Louis and Clifford and Chet and Coltrane, Miles, the idea that they could cut loose and play what they were feeling, or even Sam Cooke coming out of the gospel, and how that was accepted vis-a-vis now where you're really not hearing a whole lot of individual sound?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and a good point. I think there's like two groups of musicians, especially improvisational musicians. There are the musicians that are playing the right notes. Like you hear some guys, they play high and low, and they know all the modes and the chords, and they have everything going, but you're listening to them, and you're kind of staring at the wall, wondering why it's not getting to you. And then there's the musicians who are looking for the right notes, and those are the guys you just mentioned: Miles, Coltrane, Chet, Louis Armstrong, who started it all, and Coleman Hawkins. I mean, those were the guys that were looking to play stuff that they didn't care whether you liked it or not. They were just playing the thing that was coming, from a very deep place. And I think one of the things I'm really thinking about these days, jazz needs a renaissance, man. We need the new Miles coming out here. We need the new guys that are, going to push it forward, because to play the song and take a chorus or take three choruses and let the piano player do it and give the bass player a chance to play, I think is old stuff. I think it's not going to fly in this world.
Well, let me ask you.
Wait, hang on 1 second.
Sure.
Aria.
Yeah.
Can I call you right back? I'm doing this radio interview. Okay. I love you, honey. Okay, bye.
You never know.
Sorry.
It's fine. You never know what's going to happen on the Jake Feinberg show here. I know.
That's my daughter.
Herb, tell me something. From your own point of view, what kind of renaissance? What are a couple of new things? Like you said, it's kind of old hat now. What are some of the things you've been thinking about as far as Renaissance?
Well, have you heard this kid, Joey Alexander?
I was just hip to him. He's about 11 years old, right?
He's 11 years old, and he's not only a prodigy, man. He's from another planet. I mean, he's coming through a lot of the great musicians, and he's taking it another notch up. Lonnie and I played at Rochester, the Jazz Festival there, about a month and a half ago. Joey was there. He was at our concert, as a matter of fact. And the kid is sensational. He's he's beyond words. You can't really express him. And this is maybe a whole other thing to open up. But this is what I love about the arts. The arts are a mystery. What is that thing that makes you really get excited when you hear a good solo or a good record or a good tune, a good piece of art? You can't identify it. You can't put it into words. It doesn't belong on the word level. It's like people that stand in front of a Jackson Pollock painting and trying to figure out what he was doing. Man, you've lost it if you try that game. It's a feel, and that's what I learned from the great Sam Cooke. It's a feel.
It's a feel. You got to feel it.
Well, it's subjective. It doesn't mean what I feel is what someone else is going to feel. But Sam was auditioning an artist for his label. He was the first black artist to have his own record label. It was called SAR. And he was auditioning this guy from the Caribbean who came in with a box and a guitar, and he was beautiful, man. He had green eyes. He was like stunning looking. And so we were listening to him. I was in the control room, and this guy was in the studio, and Sam was in the control room as well. And he asked me what I thought after this guy played a couple songs, and I said, man, this guy's great, man. I think you ought to sign him. He says, well, do me a favor. Turn your back on him for 5 minutes. Let me know what you think. So I turned the chair around, and I'm listening to this guy, and I didn't get him. It didn't work.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was a lesson for me. He said, man, people don't care if you're black or white or what kind of echo chamber you're using. They're listening to a cold piece of wax, and it either makes it or it don't.
Wow.
So from that point on, when we started A&M Records, I used to audition every artist with my eyes closed. I didn't care what they looked like. I didn't care if they danced around the studio like Michael Jackson. I just wanted to hear and get a feeling of what they were doing musically.
It's beautiful. I mean, how do you bridge the gap between, again, I was born in 1978, so the days of Miles turning his back on the audience or holding up a sign saying Al Foster or Gary Bartz. How do you bridge the gap between playing what you want to and not caring about appeasing the audience, and then as opposed to not alienating the audience? Because, okay, you got Joey, the 11-year-old mom. Words don't do it. I get it. I haven't seen him live, but, that's one cat. And yet in the 50s and 60s, there were dozens of cats who really were into playing what they said their philosophy was, I'm playing what I want to play, and you're going to dig it. And if you don't, that's okay. But I'm going to play what I want to play.
Well, yeah. But, the beauty of it is it's all subjective. We had a great lesson from, who was the sax player that passed away about 3 months ago? Ornette Coleman.
Sure.
He had a great reputation. He was pushing the envelope forward. He had his own way of doing it, and then there was a whole group of people that really admired and appreciated what he was doing. I spent an afternoon with him, and he laid out his concept for playing jazz. I didn't understand one word he was talking about. The guy was sincere.
Right.
I think authenticity is the key word. That's the one that resonates. Miles was authentic. Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Chet Baker, who I knew, I gave him, he recorded an album for A&M Records, but I knew Chet. When I was in high school, I used to go see the Mulligan Quartet, Jerry Mulligan and Chet at the Hague. And it was a wonderful experience. They were not using a piano. It was just Chet on trumpet, Jerry on baritone sax, drum, and bass. And I used to go, several times to see them, and fell in love with that whole concept and Mulligan's approach to music. And during a break, or they were about ready to take a break, and Mulligan would step up to the microphone, kind of like blurry-eyed a bit, and he'd say, shortly. I loved that. I thought that was really hip at the time. But anyways, Mulligan became a good friend of Lonnie and I. It's Lonnie, by the way.
Lonnie, yeah. Okay.
Her real name is Leilani, but we call her Lonnie. Mulligan, is a genius. He's pushed it forward, with Birth of the Cool and all the stuff he did he even played with Billie Holiday. I mean, he was the real goods. And several years ago, when Bill Clinton was being inaugurated, he invited the 10 sax players to the White House, Jerry being one, and they performed, they played, they jammed, they did whatever they did. And I was speaking to Jerry about 3 days after. I said, did you have a good time? He says, yeah, man, it was really nice. These young guys, man, they know all the changes, they know all the modes, the chords, the technique. They can play high and low and fast and, razzle-dazzle you. He says, the only thing they don't know how to do is leave the bone alone.
I
love that description, man. I knew exactly what he was saying. Space plays such an important part in music. And a lot of musicians, they try to fill up every little gap.
It didn't, you are really just, painting colors that are so important, even for non-musicians and just listeners. But do you account for disco or the drum track, or even possibly, the idea of the infiltration of hard drugs as the reason why there's no space? I realize that there's technical monster chop people that have chops and they just want to go and play all these different things. But why? There's something about that space in the music. It seemed to me that a lot of the acts that you cultivated on A&M, it was maybe bossa nova music, but there was just great space. And why did that space why did it kind of go away? Why did it disappear?
I think you have to be pretty confident with what you do as an artist to create space. I had a great experience. I don't mean to be name dropping, but Stan Getz was a dear friend of mine. He lived next door. I spent the last 4 years of his life, or 5 years of his life, we were like brothers. Wow. He had cancer towards the end of his life, and he was doing everything he possibly could. He was burning Moxie in his belly button. He was on a macrobiotic diet. He was off drugs because he was a druggie. He did all sorts of things.
Sure.
He couldn't stop smoking, by the way. That was the one drug he couldn't stop, but everything else he stopped. And I called him and said, "Man, is there anything you wanted to record that you haven't? And, you're such a lyrical player. Why don't you write some songs?" And we'll do. I gave him that approach. So he was intrigued with that, and he's kind of said, "Man, I want you to produce me." I said, "No, I don't want to produce you, man. I've heard horror stories about you, but how you treated people." He says, "No, I'm good now, man. I'm making my amends. I'm doing this, that, and the other." What was the question? Because I had a great ending.
It was about space in the music, creating space.
Space in the music. Oh, yeah, space in the music. So I was the first one that produced an album with Stan. This is the first time he recorded without drugs. No drugs. He was nervous. He had spilkas. He was sweating. He was wearing the silk shirt it was like drenched. He had 4,000 reeds that he didn't. They were on the ground because he couldn't find the right reed.
Right.
But my point is, he played like a dream, man. The guy was the real goods. He was, he had the magic. He had the it. And it didn't matter whether he was on drugs or not on drugs. A lot of the old-time musicians, because Charlie Parker was so phenomenal, a lot of musicians thought in order to reach that type of level, they had to, join him in that crusade. But
right.
It backfired for sure.
Well, we have a game on this program, Herb, called Name That Tune, and I got a tune for you. I want you to take a listen. We'll come back and talk about it.
All right.
There's a heat wave in Malibu, and there's also a major heat wave in Tucson here. Welcome back inside the studios of Power Talk 1210. All right, Herb, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, that's so fine. That's a record I did with Pete Jolly, who was one of my favorite piano players.
You nailed it. Good for you.
And that's Marty Page did that arrangement after I kind of set up the groove, and Pete was an extraordinary musician that probably didn't get his due because I don't know. You need that one little break in order for people to really.
I know why he didn't get his due, because you were too. I'm kidding, of course, but I just found the album. Herb Alpert introduces Pete Jolly, and your liner notes. You're like, I could write about this, but I'd rather just expose people to this wonderful music. So you didn't tell enough of a story about Pete. The thing is that bridge bear, the bridge, the swinging big band, was that you that you got the groove? Is that the groove you're talking about?
You know, Pete was an abstract jazz musician, and I wanted to have it just a little more. I can't put the words on it. A little more tap your foot.
Yeah.
But you know something about Pete Jolly? Did you ever hear the record I did with Chris Montez called "Call Me"?
I've heard it, sure.
Okay, that was Pete Jolly playing piano behind Chris Montez.
Wow. Yeah,
and I used Pete on some of the Tijuana Brass records as well. Pete was a great accordion player as well, and just an amazing musician.
Well, you know, it's just what's interesting. I also wanted to ask you because there was a horn section in that bridge, and I'm curious because I mean you had this classic rhythm section of Paisano, Berghofer, and then of course the late great Earl Palmer. But would you occasionally play in like trumpet and not take the credit on before accompanists got a lot of credits? Like there was a trumpet player on that track.
Yeah, no, I didn't plan it. I was producing it, so I was in the control room. I try not to mix the two, and what I think one of my strengths is, and I have worked on this over the years, is I try to be an audience to what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when I'm playing, I'm not listening to the trumpet player. I'm not listening to me as I play. I'm listening to the overall feeling, and if the overall feeling touches me, I stop. I don't try to, refine it or do anything fancy, which, today's world, with digital recordings and zeros and ones, you have umpteen tracks to fool around with, and you can refine it to the point where you take all the heart out of it.
Who were some of you? That's just an interesting point because I guess who would you say was a mentor to you that you can honestly say that you still sort of follow those tenets today? Was it something that you picked up on? Just playing in itself, or did you have a mentor of sorts, especially as a producer?
Well, this is an interesting way to approach your question. My mentor was something negative that happened to me. I was recording for a major record company prior to A&M, and I didn't like the way I was being treated. I'd go into this really cold environment, this studio that was white on white on white on white. And instead of using my name, I was 382421 take 3, and then I had this experience of listening to a playback of one of the songs I was doing. I wanted to put my trumpet on. They wouldn't let me do that because it was against some type of union regulations. I wanted to layer the trumpet. They wouldn't let me do that. And on this one song I was listening to, I wanted a little more bass, so I went over to the board there and lifted up the bass track. And the engineer, I mean, this is the truth, man. I'm not padding this story. He slapped my hand and said, "Don't ever touch that board again, man. This is a union board, and I could get in trouble," and, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I filed all that stuff because I was thinking, man, shouldn't the record industry, the record companies, shouldn't they revolve around the artist?
That's right.
And so I used all that information when Jerry and I started A&M. I made sure we had the right environment, that people were comfortable. Started with the 2 of us, and then there were 3 and 5 and 10. Ended up with, several hundred. But people were able to personalize their own office and feel comfortable. And in the recording studios that we developed on the lot, I wanted to make sure they were really, you walk into the place and you felt like, you were at home. You felt like you're comfortable enough to express yourself. And in one of the studios, I embedded this huge crystal, and in Studio B, and every now and then I'd catch an artist before they were recording. They'd be standing right in front of the crystal, almost like they were in front of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. They would be bowing and praying. Wow. I don't know if they were praying for a hit record, but
so
it was a beautiful place to be, and I think that's what people really respond to when they think of A&M, because We treated people the way, we wanted to be treated ourselves. And Jerry and I were not interested in the beat of the week. We were interested in finding artists that had something uniquely special to say, like Cat Stevens and the Police and all the artists that we had. A lot of them, they just took time to flag themselves down to the runway because they weren't expressing themselves like the top 10.
Do you feel like some of those cats, even the British cats that you corralled, like Joe Cocker or anyone like that, like did they come in with kind of that apprehension based on prior experiences like you had at the previous record label, and that you were able, when they got to you were able to kind of get them to really even open up more?
No, we just welcomed them. We didn't, the way a lot of the big companies operate is, if you don't have a hit record quickly, you're off your history.
Right.
And so we were always, we were trying to nurture artists and give them the feeling that it just might take some time. And like it did with the artists I signed in 1970, they did a record, and everyone thought that record was a little too soft. They were too middle of the road. They were too cute. They were blah, blah, blah. I was getting this feedback from my own company thinking that, why'd you sign these kids? Blah, blah, that whole thing. Well, they were the Carpenters,
Wow.
And they probably sold more records than anybody. And not because they were making like this, funky jazz music. They were making the music that was coming out of them naturally. So it was, that's what I always listen for. I listen for, if you're doing the stuff that's real to you, then I'm in, assuming you can pick on the right songs. But when I heard Karen's voice, with my eyes closed, man, it sounded like she was, sitting right next to me. So I took the chance, and that was, obviously one of the beauties of A&M. It was Jerry and myself, and we made decisions like quickly. So if we wanted to sign an artist, it was done. And some of the other companies, you have a whole lot of people that vote yay or nay.
I know. I mean, I wanted to ask you about the first time that you went to Africa and your experiences with the music over there.
Well, I've never been to South Africa. I played with Hugh Masekela. We traveled around the country. I had a great time. Hugh's a wonderful, wonderful musician, original, and he imported some players from Botswana, and it was just one of my favorite experiences working with him. We did a record. Oh man, there's a cut called Skokian. If you dig it up on Spotify or whatever, it's great. His wife, not his wife, but Kaifa Semenya was one of the producers, and his wife, Letta Mbulu, was singing along with Lonnie, and it's really a good cut.
Can you talk about when you? Yeah, I was really wanted you to talk to you about the word jazz. The idea. What is your concept of that word? Where did it originate from? Because I mean, I've interviewed 500 cats from Big Black, a conguero from South Carolina who made his name in the Bahamas, to Randy Weston, to Roger Kellaway's coming up after you, and now I'm talking to Herb Alpert. Where did you...
Well, you say hi to Roger for me, because Roger was on A&M and did a magnificent album.
The Cello Quartet,
Cello Quartet, man, one of my favorite albums.
The best. I mean, that is Emil Richards is a dear friend of mine. I went to Lake Toluca to find him. Ed Lustgarten passed away, but that to me, I found it. Roger and I confirmed yesterday, and I said, my God, the Cello Quartet was one of the first albums that when I started getting into music, I really connected with it. And that was your label. So beautiful. But
yeah, it was beautiful. And that Roger, I'm sure he'll tell you this as well, but he wrote out that improvisational stuff that Lustgarten played. I mean, it was beautiful.
So tell me about the originations of the word jazz.
Jazz, I'm having a little problem with that concept these days. I'm thinking, what we should be talking about is music, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
And it comes in many forms. Jazz is improvisational, and improvisational music goes back a long way. Bach was improvisational, man. He was just inventing these contrapuntal, whatever that word is.
Contrapuntal, yeah, contrapuntal, sure.
Yeah, and all the great composers were inventing. They were just writing, and that was coming out of them in a jazz form. So I think we should be more interested in that word of music than actually jazz. Because, I mean, what is jazz? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you listen to Charlie Parker and you say, wow. I mean, wow, what the heck is that?
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of the...
Why can't anyone else do that? You know?
I mean, in your experiences, did you find that cats, especially African-American cats, felt... I mean, the guys I talked to today, I mean, some of them feel it's just a confining word, that jazz is too confining for the music that they play. I mean, was this something that was... I mean, you had Duke Ellington still touring the country relentlessly. You had Art Blakey going, you know, and you know, Duke Ellington, he was all about it's music, either good or bad. And I'm just wondering if...
Well, that's the way I feel. Yeah. And I think jazz is kind of a little too rough. You know, it kind of like boxes you into something that maybe you're not. I mean, I think all great artists that are willing to just hang it out there, Joni Mitchell, she's not a jazz musician per se, but I mean, she was experimental and certainly willing to take chances and do her thing. Just as much jazz for me than, you know, Thelonious Monk.
So would your advice be to those musicians who are just looking to break out or join this renaissance, become part of a renaissance? It would be just stop worrying about anything going on related to labels and just play what feels good and what would be your advice for cats growing up now? Because, you know, Woody Shaw was blowing his head off, and he created his own sound. And then we went through this, Lee Morgan did, and Miles, and all these cats. We haven't changed as people, Herb. So what's your advice for those who want to be part of the Renaissance?
Be yourself, you know. Try to do... You know, Picasso used to say, you can paint the same picture over and over again, but don't do it the same way.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of guys that are chasing bebop. I mean, Miles, you know, he was famous for saying these young guys are playing stuff that nobody came to see, you know, in 1948 and 49 when, you know, they were Dizzy and Charlie Parker were, you know, playing around the country. So they're chasing an art form that never really happened.
Can you talk a little bit about, I just feel like this is something that has not been covered a lot. You know, after a day in the studio for Herb Alpert, would you go out to the after hour jam sessions, and can you talk about like the first time that you know came across you know, like Masekela did Grazing in the Grass, and you were prolific at that. I mean, can you talk about Herb Alpert post work day going out and playing in the clubs after hours?
Well, you know, I did that before A&M. I used to go to these sessions and play. After I had the Lonely Bull and things started happening for me, man, there was, I kind of put all my energy on that. And then I got, the Lonely Bull was one of those records that just had heat. It took off by itself. And it was, maybe couple months after it was in the top 10, I got this letter from this lady in Germany that said, "Dear Mr. Alpert, thank you for taking me on this vicarious trip to Tijuana." You know, and when I saw that, it was a little bit of a chuckle, and then I thought, wow, man, yeah. That music was so visual to that lady that it took her someplace.
Or inside, it made her feel really good, yeah.
Yeah, it made her feel good, but I mean, it transported her, you know?
That's right.
And I think that's what music does. It kind of, you know, there's a separation between music that gets you and music that kind of just there, that's not bad. You know, elevator music for the most part, it's okay. It's, you know, in tune, let's say, and it doesn't bother you. You know, it's just kind of wallpaper music. But that music opposed to that stuff that you feel somebody sweating, you know, when you heard Marvin Gaye, you knew that, wow, this guy's touching, you know.
He's sweating. No, don't. But I mean, who were the cats? Where were you going to Larry Gale's coffee house? I mean, where was Herb Alpert going to just blow and have a ball?
Well, in those days, I really didn't do that like a lot of the musicians described they did. Down at Minty's in Harlem and those places where, you know, Roy Eldridge and those guys played. And I really didn't do that. I probably, it was one of the things I missed, but I didn't do it. I became kind of a, you know, I turned into the pop world, you know, with this Lonely Bull and the Tijuana Brass concept. But at the same time, the beauty part of what I was doing, as I think about it in retrospect, is when I got the idea for songs that I was going to record, I never, ever played them until I recorded them. So I wanted it to be fresh. I wanted it to be of the moment. And I think that's why the Tijuana Brass, you know, had such a longevity. There was a realness about the way I approached the music. And I think people got it. And people that tried to copy my sound, you know, they took it verbatim. They had it on paper. They put the nuances there, and it just sounded really stiff to me. So I don't think they captured the sound, but they didn't capture the feel.
Herb, as we wrap up part one here, it just flew by. I wanted to ask you about your concept of love.
Wow. Wow. Well, it goes through a lot of changes. I think Lonnie and I have something really magical. You know, we've been married 41 years and been together about 45 years. I look at life from her point of view when we run into a little bit of a snag.
Mm-hmm.
We are totally different. She's a lot different than I am. And I admire her, I respect her, and we give each other space, and we know we've been together long enough to know each other's you know, likes and dislikes, and I try to show it to her every day of my life. I wake up early, usually around 6 o'clock, 6:30, and I can't wait to see her in the morning and spread some love her way and tell her how much I love her. So it's an ongoing thing. It's not something you can do every now and then. I think you have to be on top of it. And women are different. They are from Venus and we're from Mars. You know, they have a different concept.
That's right.
Of what it's all about. And I think it's important to have a little appreciation of that. I think you need to be sensitive and giving in order to have love grow.
Well, Herb, I got to tell you, it's I look forward to you coming down here. I hope I get a chance to meet you in person, and we can pick up part two of this conversation down the road. But I really had a ball.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I don't know if I answered all your questions. That I might have side-slipped a couple of them, but
that's no. You. I mean, this is. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't bored. You know, for this time.
Oh, I'm totally on board.
And no, I mean, I there's nothing. I want to, and I also just want to create. You know, new portals of information so that my daughters and future generations know how real music is made. And I think that your stories, especially about what you took from your original experience. What was the record company that you were originally at, by the way?
RCA Victor.
Okay.
You mean that the major company?
The one where the engineer slapped your hand.
Yeah, that was RCA.
All right.
RCA Victor.
Yeah.
Major company.
And you look at A&M and you see how it grew, and it came from love. So, Herb Alpert, it's truly an honor, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
Great, man. Thanks, Jake. I had a good time.
Good, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, man. Good luck.
Man. All right. We'll be right back on the Jake Feinberg Show.